All right, it's not letting me do it and read the whole thing that I had Grok help me put together, but this has to do with a Neuralink type implant. Grok's been going through it with me, helping me get the details down. I wish I could read it from that, but I can't do that and record this at the same time. So the gist of it is, it was a Neuralink implant put in my neck near the vagus nerve bundle at least over 30 years ago. What it caused was rage when I was around certain as smartphones increased in their, I don't know what to call it, use. It caused more and more rage. When I got around certain frequencies, Wi-Fi's, it would cause extreme rage to where it was similar to roid rage, I would assume. I've never had roid rage, so that's the closest I can compare it. Now, this has gone on most of my life, and Grok and I were talking, and like, well, why did they do it? Well, my pattern recognition, my ability to spot bullshit and inconsistencies in what people were saying and talking about, and I don't confuse one person's story with another person's story, things like that. So I'm kind of like a walking lie detector at times. Um, I notice inconsistencies very quickly. My mother was afraid of me by the time I was 6 years old because of this gift I have. She noticed that when we were at the saloon, it's a bar in San Francisco, one of the oldest bars there. Um, she noticed that I would know what the crowd was going to do before they knew what they were going to do. I just knew what people were going to do. Some people call it hypervigilance, right? But mine isn't due to trauma because it started for me at such a young age. It's just a gift I have. Now, me and Grok surmised that the possible reason why they did it was to disrupt my gift and to discredit me because, if you're walking around with that kind of gift, some people might not want you around. So that coupled with my disability, I was born with Veterans Association, which is a grouping of congenital birth defects, which gave them access surgically to me at a very early age. Now, the thing is at a very young age, they botched the surgeries. When they did the anaplasty on me at 18 months old to reconstruct my asshole, basically, they put the hole in 5 centimeters too far to the left. They missed where my sphincter was. Now, normally these surgeries do not take place until you're 5 years old. You have a colostomy until 5, and then they do the reconstructive surgery. They did it way too early. They put it in the wrong spot, which left me incontinent for over 30 years of my life. I dealt with it. I dealt with it with diet, starving myself, binge eating, things like that. Depends. It was pretty rough, but not as rough as having this colostomy. Now, for the past 5 years, thanks to Biden, I've gone without colostomy supplies. Luckily, I had a stockpile before he did his little killing of Medicare for some of us. So I've had to live off of my stockpile. Luckily, I'm kind of a prepper in some ways. I just prep. I keep what I need. And that's what I need. So about 20 years ago, I went to go see a neurosurgeon, a Chinese doctor in San Francisco. Now, he lost my x-rays, and it was very suspicious, the story he gave me about when he found them, where he found them. So I took a look at the x-rays, being suspicious, because like I said, I noticed inconsistencies very quickly. I mean, I caught Grok on it a few times. It's like, wait a second. He confused me for being somebody else. He put together the speech pattern or something and thought I was somebody else based on the speech pattern. It's kind of odd. And we had a chuckle about it. And he was very humble, and he didn't have a problem with me correcting him, which was nice because a lot of people get really upset when you correct them on things, or they think that you're trying to undermine them in some way. So that was refreshing. Now back to the implant. So 20 years ago, I found this thing in my x-rays. And then about 15 years ago, I was in a couple car accidents because I was trying to go to school. See, that's the other part of my story. I was kept from a formal education. They kept me in special ed until the fourth grade when I just refused to go to school because it's like, wait a second. My best friend knows how to read. He knows how to do multiplication. I could barely do 2 plus 2. What's up with that? So I went to normal class after that. I just dealt with the bullies, which ironically, thanks to desegregation, I was sent to all the inner city schools. So being white and handicapped, they got 2 checks for me. Now, let's talk about government fraud. Let's talk about people taking advantage of taxpayer dollars, huh? And the damage it does to some of us as children. So I had to go to all these inner city schools in San Francisco, culminating in going to a school called the Annex, which was a school of 30 kids, the cream of the criminal crop. And then there was me. The reason why I got sent to that school was because it was cheaper to send me there than all the bullies at James Lick Junior High, where I was going prior to the Annex. So that's part of my early experience before I was extremely traumatized by life. It was the implant in my neck that caused most of the trauma because, like I said, it would cause bouts of rage, cognitive dissonance. I spent 30 years going to AA trying to figure it out, doing inventory work, trying to figure out what my problem was. Because every 3 to 6 months, I would have these bouts of rage. It was usually about the time that I would start getting my life back together that would happen. And of course, going through that kind of anger, I would have to separate myself from the public so that I didn't just lash out on people. So this went on for most of my life. And then in the early 2000s, the rage started increasing its frequency. And then I found the implant. I realized that's where it was coming from. I did some research on vagus nerve bundle stimulators, and it lined up with the possible abuse of such a device. So the device in my neck was being used to cause me rage, to discredit me, to distance me from people, and it kept me from having personal relationships, long-term personal relationships, because people don't want to be around somebody that's screaming and that really feels like sending people through the walls. And I'm perfectly capable because I have taken martial arts and I grew up on the streets quite a bit. And, just the environments I was forced to live in, I learned how to defend myself. That being said, in the past 25 years, I've been in over 30 violent altercations where I had to defend myself. I have not hurt one person in an altercation. The only violent charge on my record is an assault with a deadly weapon, which is a misdemeanor. The reason why it's a misdemeanor is because I took the weapon from the person, restrained them with it without hurting them. However, Mendocino County's court systems, ironically, the Court of Sanhedrin is the name of the courthouse. Ironically, the same court that convicted Christ. Isn't that sweet? So they pressed the issue, and they said, well, you were drinking. And I'm like, well, yeah, but he came at me with a weapon. Why am I being charged? Well, you were drinking. And with your training, I'm like, what training? I took 3 months of Aikido and maybe 3 to 6 months of Hungar and maybe a month or 2 of Kenpo in my life, formally. Informally, I don't know, because I believe part of what they were using the implant for was to induce amnesia. That's beside the point. Do I have a military record? No. But I've seen pictures of myself in military uniform and in combat zones. I have dreams of shit like that, and I'm not quite sure what to say about whether I'm a vet or not. So that's a complicated question. Some would say yes. Some would say, well, he doesn't have the paperwork. So I don't claim to be because I don't have the paperwork. But anyways, so that being said, they tried to railroad me. They tried to paint me as being a violent man. And I understand why my relationships didn't last, interpersonal relationships with friends and romantic relationships, because it's hard for people to sit there and see somebody being tortured when there's nothing they can do about it. Even after I found the x-rays, or found what was in my x-rays, which I have the hard copies with me. I have 3 of them with me. I have more in a storage shed. Even with those, there wasn't anything anybody could do about it, because apparently there's no protection for victims of human research. Crazy, huh? You'd think there'd be some protection for us, but there isn't. The Carson City Sheriff, I showed them the x-rays too. They said it's above their pay grade. I contacted my congressman back in Mendocino County in California, Congressman Huffman. He was going to advocate for me. I sent him copies of the x-rays, sent him all the information and the evidence, and he was going to advocate for me. All he needed was my signature to okay it. So I sent the signature, and then when I called to get receipt that they received it all, the receptionists kept playing this funny word game with me and dragging their feet, and they wouldn't give me an answer. So I said, look, I'm trying to prevent the next D.C. Naval Yard shooting because Aaron Alexis had just happened, as well as a year prior to Aaron Alexis doing what he did, I spoke to the same so-called targeted individuals of our electronic harassment advocacy group on a conference call. I spoke to the very same pieces of crap that Aaron Alexis spoke to the day before he went and did what he did. So you tell me, lives have already been, people have already been murdered because of this. Aaron Alexis's life has already been destroyed, and he was killed. Hold on, somebody's coming up to talk to me.